Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a pretty profound psychological journey. We're going to explore one of the absolute most fundamental questions of human existence, which is, how do we survive suffering? And, more importantly, how do we keep from losing our minds, our hope, and our basic humanity when everything around us just seems completely dark? To answer this, we're going to look at one of the most powerful concepts in modern psychology: why finding purpose is literally the ultimate safeguard against despair.
Okay, let's dive into this. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." Now, this isn't just some nice motivational phrase you put on a poster. It's a profound psychological thesis. It suggests that having a purpose, a why, isn't just a luxury for when times are good, it's the ultimate survival tool when times are impossibly bad. If you know exactly why you're enduring something, you can physically and mentally endure almost any how that life throws at you.
And really, nobody proved this more vividly than psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. The insights we're unpacking in this explainer are distilled directly from his harrowing, lived experiences in the Auschwitz concentration camp during the Holocaust. You see, Frankl didn't just study human resilience in some comfortable, quiet laboratory. He lived it in the absolute most horrific conditions imaginable. He essentially served as the existential validation of his own psychiatric theories, transforming unimaginable suffering into an empowering, enduring lesson on human resilience.
So, part one, the ultimate stress test.
To truly understand Frankl's insights, we really have to look at the concentration camp as the ultimate psychological stress test. I mean, what actually happens when a human being is systematically dismantled? When prisoners arrived, they weren't just imprisoned, they were completely erased. Names were replaced by numbers. Frankl himself was reduced to prisoner number 119104. Every single hair on their bodies was shaved. All personal possessions were confiscated. Frankl actually had a roll of paper hidden in his coat. It was a manuscript of his entire life's scientific work, and it was just mocked and thrown away. This process leaves a person with nothing but their utterly naked existence. When you sever all material links to a person's former life like that, you leave them incredibly vulnerable to absolute despair.
Moving into part two, the anatomy of absolute despair.
So, what happens to a mind under that level of crushing pressure? Frankl, leaning on his background as a psychiatrist, carefully observed the specific psychological breakdowns of his fellow inmates as the grim reality of their situation really set in. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer hopelessness of it all. Upon arrival, an SS officer would simply point a finger to the right or to the left. Roughly 90% of the people on a given transport were sent directly to the gas chambers. Only about 10% were kept alive for forced labor. When your existence hangs on the casual flick of a stranger's finger, it's alarmingly easy to just completely lose the will to live, right then and there.
Frankl noticed that the prisoners generally went through distinct mental phases. Step one was shock, and this was often accompanied by something called a delusion of reprieve, which is a psychological condition where a condemned person desperately believes they might be saved at the very last minute. But as reality set in, they transitioned into step two, apathy. This was a necessary protective shell, basically an emotional death. Prisoners became completely numb to the horrors around them. Frankl describes this horrifying moment where he felt literally zero emotion watching gangrenous toes being pulled off a fellow inmate, or casually sipping his watery soup while staring at the glazed eyes of a corpse that had just been dragged past him. The mind simply had to shut down to survive the daily beatings and death.
All right, part three, the power of a why.
Under these exact same horrific physical conditions, starving on a few ounces of bread, freezing in rags, completely exhausted, why did some men survive and maintain their humanity, while others simply surrender to the void? Well, Frankl noticed a stark contrast between two types of prisoners. On one side, there were those who completely gave up on life. In the grim vocabulary of the camp, an emaciated prisoner who lost all will to work or live was called a Moslem. They lost all hope in a future, and inevitably, they were the first to die. They basically succumbed to despair long before they succumbed to disease. On the flip side were prisoners who somehow managed to retain their inner drive. They held on to a future. They held on to a purpose.
So the crucial point is how Frankl actually defined this purpose. He realized that life isn't primarily a quest for pleasure, like Freud suggested, or a quest for power, like Adler believed. Life is fundamentally a quest for meaning. And he outlined three primary ways we find it. First, through work, doing a deed or creating something significant. Second, through love, experiencing something or encountering someone. And third, through courage, specifically the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering.
You see, suffering in and of itself is totally meaningless. We give our suffering meaning by the way we choose to respond to it. Which brings us to part 4, purpose through inner life. This introduces a truly incredible concept. When all external freedom is entirely stripped away, when your body is imprisoned, your life's work is destroyed, and your loved ones are torn from you, the inner world becomes the absolute only place left to construct purpose. Frankl experienced this profound realization during an agonizing, miles-long march in the freezing cold before dawn. Stumbling over icy puddles, driven by the butts of guards' rifles, the men were completely silent. But in his mind, Frankl was holding this incredibly vivid, intense conversation with his wife. He asked her questions, he heard her answer, he saw her smile. And in that moment of utter physical desolation, he was struck by a profound thought. The salvation of man is through love and in love. And what's truly astonishing here is that Frankl didn't even know if his wife was alive at that moment. But the physical reality simply didn't matter anymore. His book actually includes a poignant dedication to his mother, which proves that his anchor and familial love was indestructible. He realized that love goes far beyond the physical person. It finds its deepest meaning in their spiritual being. The sheer act of loving contemplation was enough to sustain his spirit, and it gave him this massive psychological shield against despair. This intense inner life allowed the prisoners to retreat from their terrible surroundings into a world of spiritual freedom. Just look at the riches they found in complete desolation. They survived by vividly recalling nostalgic memories of simple things, like taking a bus ride or the familiar click of unlocking their front door at home. They found themselves utterly moved to tears by the beauty of nature, a vibrant Bavarian sunset cutting through the miserable gray mud of the camp, or just a single bird silently perching on a heap of dug-up soil looking steadily right at them. In a world totally devoid of joy, these microscopic moments of beauty became monumental reasons to keep going. Let's move to section 5 and see how this builds to what Frankl calls the last human freedom. Frankl's observations in these extremes reveal the absolute core mechanics of human psychology. The reality is, suffering is an ineradicable part of life. Now, while your daily hardships and struggles hopefully look absolutely nothing like a concentration camp, the psychological mechanics of overcoming despair remain exactly the same. We all face situations we can't control. We all face loss, sickness, and pain. But the meaning of that suffering isn't baked into the event itself. The meaning is entirely constructed by how you choose to respond to it. And this brings us to Viktor Frankl's ultimate thesis. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." You just cannot always control what happens to you in life. Fate is going to throw things at you that are entirely out of your hands. But you can always control what you feel and what you do about what happens to you. That inner freedom is yours, and it is yours alone. So we end with this. Forces beyond your control can absolutely strip away your job, your status, your health, or your possessions, but they cannot force you to surrender your purpose. Despair happens when suffering is combined with a lack of meaning. So my question to you is this: when the inevitable storms of life hit, what is your why? How will you use your last human freedom to choose your response, find your purpose, and defeat despair? Take some time to really think about that, because finding that answer truly is the greatest task of your life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.